بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ويل للمطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون ليوم عظيم يوم يقوم الناس لرب العالمين. كلا إن كتاب الفجار لفي سجين وما أدراك ما سجين كتاب مرقوم. ويل يومئذ للمكذبين الذين يكذبون بيوم الدين وما يكذب به إلا كل معتد أثيم. إذا تتلى عليه آياتنا قال أساطير الأولين كلا بل ران على قلوبهم ما كانوا يكسبون. كلا إنهم عن ربهم يومئذ لمحجوبون ثم إنهم لصالو الجحيم ثم يقال هذا الذي كنتم به تكذبون. كلا إن كتاب الأبرار لفي عليين وما أدراك ما عليون كتاب مرقوم يشهده المقربون. إن الأبرار لفي نعيم على الأرائك ينظرون تعرف في وجوههم نضرة النعيم يسقون من رحيق مختوم ختامه مسك وفي ذلك فليتنافس المتنافسون. ومزاجه من تسنيم عينا يشرب بها المقربون. إن الذين أجرموا كانوا من الذين آمنوا يضحكون وإذا مروا بهم يتغامزون وإذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم انقلبوا فكهين وإذا رأوهم قالوا إن هؤلاء لضالون وما أرسلوا عليهم حافظين. فاليوم الذين آمنوا من الكفار يضحكون على الأرائك ينظرون هل ثوب الكفار ما كانوا يفعلون.
Shoaib is blind and he is a Hafiz al-Quran. He will do a recitation from the Quran for us. Okay.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وإذ بوأنا لإبراهيم مكان البيت ألا تشرك بي شيئا وطهر بيتي للطائفين والقائمين والركع السجود. وأذن في الناس بالحج يأتوك رجالا وعلى كل ضامر يأتين من كل فج عميق ليشهدوا منافع لهم ويذكروا اسم الله في أيام معلومات على ما رزقهم من بهيمة الأنعام فكلوا منها وأطعموا البائس الفقير ثم ليقضوا تفثهم وليوفوا نذورهم وليطوفوا بالبيت العتيق. ذلك ومن يعظم حرمات الله فهو خير له عند ربه. وأحلت لكم الأنعام إلا ما يتلى عليكم فاجتنبوا الرجس من الأوثان واجتنبوا قول الزور حنفاء لله غير مشركين به ومن يشرك بالله فكأنما خر من السماء فتخطفه الطير أو تهوي به الريح في مكان سحيق. ذلك ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب لكم فيها منافع إلى أجل مسمى ثم محلها إلى البيت العتيق.
Barakallah. Barakallah. Thank you, Brother Hafiz Shuaib, for that recitation. We are at present over here the guests of the Region Business School, and we have Brother Ridwan Aswad, who is one of the managers or directors in this institution. Before we get into our IPCI program, I'd like to call Ridwan to say a few words, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think firstly I must say welcome to each and every one of you. I think on behalf of Region Business School, we are very pleased and proud to have you here today. I know there are many guests from various parts of the world. We've got Saudi, we've got Thailand, Jordan, we've got South Africa, we've got various other countries as well. We are pleased to have you here, and it's very interesting because as a business school, we are in many of your countries already. We have students there where we're offering our MBA programs and a whole lot of programs. So we are encouraged to see you here. I'm personally encouraged to see the young people here. Not to say I'm very old, but I mean like the younger people who have come from these countries. It's actually, I think, for me personally, it's a very encouraging sign of the future of Islam, of the future that we as Muslims throughout the Ummah have, that we have young people that we can garner together, bring from around the world to South Africa to train on various aspects. We're hoping that you enjoy your stay with us here as Region. We want to say to IPCI, thank you for the opportunity to host you. Please use the facilities. As a learning institution, we encourage you to use the facilities, use our academics. Advocate Vahed is going to be here. You'll meet some of the other people that will be presenting to you. They work, they do a lot of interesting things. We want you to take the best that you can back to your countries, take the best to your organizations, take the best that you can take to other institutions as well. And don't forget, I mean, learning doesn't stop here. I think there's enough Quranic ayahs, there's enough hadith that talks about learning. And this is actually, Mahmoud, if you allow me, I was very encouraged because I attended a program last year in Medina, the Mile program. I don't know if you guys know of it. It was in Medina. It was a very interesting program. We learned a lot from there on leadership, on dawah, and a whole lot of aspects that we brought to South Africa as well. Please feel free. Consider this your home for the next few hours, and let us engage, let us have some good debates, and we hope you enjoy yourself. There is a whole lot of things that are going to happen. If there's anything you need, please feel free to ask, and we'll be your host, and we'll look after you, inshallah. Shukran.
Shukran, Brother Aswad, for those kind words. Now we move straight into our program. Our sessions today will be slightly adjusted compared to the previous day. At 9:30 to 10:40, we will have Advocate Mohammed Vahed will conclude his sessions. Thereafter, at 10:40, we will have a tea break to 11 o'clock. From 11 to around 11:40, Professor Raheem will continue on his session on youth that he had commenced yesterday. And that session will blend in with a session by Ahmed Shaikh, who is one of the directors also of Region. He's going to do on leadership and those kind of aspects. Okay, so that youth development, leadership will all coincide. Between 1 and 2, we will have lunch first, and then we will perform our Salat al-Zohar, and then from 2 to 3:30, we'll have Professor Mohsin Ibrahim, who will come in again. So I would ask everybody that during the tea break, let's be a little bit quick. We only got 20 minutes and resettle because we've got additional speakers over here today. So without any further words, I'll call on Advocate Vahed to continue.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What do you think about that presentation of his, that speech of his? What's your first comments regarding it?
Very interesting because as we can see, you combine the emotion with the gestures and all that combination, the more he introduced, he started from the lower level of the emotion and he raised it as he continued speaking, and all this made some impact.
Excellent. Yes. What else? What's your observations of that from a public speaking perspective? Yes, sir?
Yeah, in my opinion, he approached people with the subject so much. Really fact and they say that you want people to feel what they are going to say, make them prepare, listen.
It was very emotional. Right? Anyone else, Sheikh?
You basically captured the heart, mind, and soul in his entire speech. You know, they're actually involved. You noticed they're actually crying. They understood what he was saying, so they're involved in his entire speech.
Correct. Any other comment from a public speaking perspective? Anyone else? Yes.
Use his hands.
He used his gestures, yes, his hands, correct?
I was just saying about the same. He was using a good body language.
Good body language, okay.
Yes, anything else?
Looking for everybody.
Right, so the eye contact, he was looking at the audience all the time. Yes, anything else you observe? I think the point that the brother made in the beginning, he started off quite calm,
His voice was low.
and as he continued, he pulled up his voice as if he was going to a climax. And then as he spoke, you saw firstly his voice was being raised, his gestures increased as well. In the beginning, his hands were just at the bottom. His gestures increased as well, and then depending on the contents, when he said, Ashhadu Allah, ilaha illallah, you saw the emotion, and the people in Medina were all crying, and we listening as if we were part of that audience. Isn't that so? Right, so that is a very, very good indication of how a public speech should be. It had most of the things that we had discussed in the past few days. So, we just continue.
We will again reflect on some of the things that he did correctly. So, for instance, you must speak with vibrancy. You must build up to something gradually, increase the pace and volume. That's exactly what he did. To emphasize, you must slow down. Say each word of it loudly, slowly and carefully. So that's what he was doing in the beginning. Slowly, slowly he was speaking. And to build tension, slowly lower your volume. So again, he was lowering his volume and increasing his volume. Right, another thing that you need to do in public speaking is to try and introduce, again, you must remember we're talking about during the time when you're losing your audience. Their attention is the highest in the beginning and at the end. So when you're losing them, that is when you need to do all these things. So one of the things, again, is to show video clips. Right, so during your presentation, provided that it is handled properly, so you can say whatever you want to say, stop for a couple of seconds, play a very, very interesting video clip. It raises everyone's attention and you can continue. Right, now let's look at the importance of humor and wit. How important is it to have humor in your speeches? It helps to remember the subject, yes, and it also wakes them up. Isn't that so? It wakes them up. And there is nothing better than to having a room full of people laughing at your good humor. And it actually encourages the speaker. So it has been said that once you get people laughing, they are listening and you can tell them almost anything. And when you crack a good joke once, they're waiting for the next one and the next one. But what's very important, there's a few things to remember. Some things you must not do when it comes to humor. Firstly, don't announce humor in advance. Don't tell them that I'm going to tell them something very funny. Secondly, when it comes to humor, there's certain topics you don't touch at all. You don't touch politics. You don't touch religion. You don't touch disability. People who might be disabled, don't joke about those things. So there's 3 or 4 things that you don't talk about at all unless you are one of those people. So if you're a politician and you're laughing at politicians, it's a different story. But if we are not politicians, we don't do it. Okay. The other thing you must remember is the best humor is what's called self-deprecating humor. What's self-deprecating humor? Anyone? Self-deprecating. Self-deprecating humor is where you laugh at yourself. That's the best type of humor. Okay. I'll ask you in a moment why. See, I've got 4 sons. And you know, boys, especially when they're teenagers, they go out with their friends. When they're at school and they're at university, they go out with their friends in the night, and you tell them to come early, then sometimes they don't come early, and you tell them the next time, please make sure you're here on time, and again they don't come early, and eventually you tell them, eventually I told my son, one of them, that okay, the next time you go, take your clothes and go and stay at your friend's house. Right, so he didn't say anything. So the next time when he was going out, and you know what they normally do, especially we who got teenage sons, what they normally do is when the car is waiting outside, it's hooting, they've got their jacket over their shoulder, and then they come and not ask you, tell you, can I go? Right, that's what normally happens with teenagers. Okay, so my son then said, okay, I'm going, my car is outside. But I told him, but now you're going to be taking your clothes with you. And he didn't say anything, so I quickly went into the room and I grabbed hold of clothes and I ran behind him, and he was already outside, and I threw the clothes behind him on the floor outside, on the ground. And he just turned around, looked at it, and no reaction on his face at all. Then I went to the room again, got hold of the drawer, his socks, underwear, and all the other things, and ran behind him and threw that as well. Again, he just looked, and he just niggled, and he carried on walking. Then my other son came from the back, and he's saying, Papa, Papa, those are my clothes. Right, and you can imagine how embarrassed I felt. I threw the wrong son's clothes outside. And guess who had to pick them up? Guess who had to pick them up? Exactly. Now, that's an example of self-deprecating humor. You're laughing at yourself. It's very difficult to laugh at yourself. It's easy to make jokes about other people, but very difficult to make jokes about yourself. Right? But if you can have self-deprecating humor, it actually makes you human as far as the audience is concerned. Now, you're not there as a speaker and they are somewhere else, and they relate to you better as well. So that's important. Right, the other thing that we need to do also when it comes to getting the attention when it's lagging, you can use the visual aids. And research has shown that retention, how much the audience retains in their mind from your speech is only 10%. From visual aids, like I'm using visual aids now, from visual aids is 60%. And if a handout is given to them, and if they read the contents of the handout within the next week or two, then they will retain 85% of your speech. So that shows how important it is to try and use aids as far as possible, whatever types of aids you might be using. But one simple rule about aids is less is more. The less slides you use, the less words you use on the slides, the better. Right, another thing that you need to remember, especially when your audience's attention is lagging, is you need to have command of your environment. Now, me as a public speaker, if I'm speaking from here, what would you say is my environment? The stage, if I'm standing on a stage, the entire stage is my environment. Okay, so here, there's no stage, so the entire front is my environment. What about the rest of the venue? Is that also my environment as a speaker? It is. Right. I went to a presentation a few years back by a person by the name of, his first name was Tom, and there was a hall full of about 5,000 executives, managers, executives. He made a presentation for the entire day. He had a stage, but he only sat on a couch on the stage for 1 hour when there was an interview. The rest of the day, he was walking around the hall, walking in front, walking in the aisles. Now you can see, here's two photographs of him, right amongst the people, amongst the audience. Now when he comes right there amongst the audience and he addresses them, it is as if he's speaking directly to them. Isn't that so? If I was just standing there, those people in the back would think that they left out a bit. So if you can walk and get closer to your audience, the better. Sometimes you might have a problem is, if I walk here, they won't be able to see me from the back. But then, in his case, there were huge screens on both sides. So even though he went to the back, the people in front were able to see the screen. And there is what's called vignettes. Vignettes really means that you must stand in one spot and make one point. After you've made that one point, then you can go to another spot and make another point. I can't walk too far because of this disturbance, but you can walk different places, make one point, and then move on. That's an excellent way of presenting. Some people, they keep on walking up and down. That's not recommended. Because if I'm walking from one end to the other, the audience now, their attention is moving from one end to the other. That's not how it's supposed to be. Vignettes, vignettes. That's, in public speaking, that's the phrase or the word they use. Okay. Now let's look, this is the last section, things to be wary of. In public speaking, things that you must be very careful of not falling into the trap. So one is avoid barriers. Something that's between you and the audience. Is there any barrier between me and you? There's no barrier. Now, is there any barrier between me and you? There is a barrier. This is a barrier. If there's a table and I'm sitting and delivering the speech, then there's a barrier. As public speakers, make sure there's no barrier between you and your audience. Because then it creates a distance if there is a barrier. Right. So you'll notice from the first day I did presentations, did I ever use a podium? Did I use the podium? Did I stand behind a podium? I didn't. From the first day, I put the podium aside and I had my laptop on a small desk in front of me. Why is it necessary? Why did I have the laptop on the desk in front of me? So the advantage is I am looking at you, even though the information that's here and that's on the slide is in front of me, I am looking at you. I'm not always turning and looking there and again speaking to you and turning. So the advantage of having your laptop in front of you is that you can be connecting with your audience, that eye contact is there all the time. The question then arises, why should you not use podium or a lectern? Why shouldn't you use it? Correct, it's difficult to use your full body language if you are standing behind a podium. Secondly, will the audience be able to see your entire body? They won't be able to see your entire body. So there's definite disadvantages. Sometimes it's necessary to use a podium. Sometimes if you've got a whole speech and you have to read out the speech, which is not very good also to read out speeches, but if you've got an entire speech to read out and you have to be accurate, for instance, politicians, they have to be very accurate with whatever they're saying because it goes into the newspaper, every word. So sometimes it's necessary to have a podium. But if you have to use a podium for purposes of your notes, leave the podium on your side or a table on your side. Don't stand behind it. You saw those clips I showed you of Sheikh Deedat? There was a table, but it was on his side. All the Quran and the Bibles and things were there, so he had to refer to it. So it was there, but there was no barrier between him and the audience. Next question. Should you sit or should you stand when you deliver your speech? Sorry, I can't come too far there because of the disturbance. I'm just standing here. Should you stand or should you sit? Stand. Correct. If you stand, the advantage is the people can see you. If you're sitting, difficult. What else? Yes. Okay, but what's the other disadvantages of sitting? Firstly, it's difficult for the people to see you. Secondly, what about your voice projection? You might not be able to see them all. Also, your breathing is affected. If I'm standing, it's easier for me to breathe deeply than if I'm sitting. What about the gestures? If I'm sitting, there'll be limited gestures. Although the Sheikh did a very good job. Although he was sitting, his gestures you could see, right? But he used it very well. But if he was standing, the gestures could have been even more. He was up so people could see him. That was an advantage. Sometimes it's necessary to sit. Person is old, he might be sick, etc. In our country, the thing that people normally do, no matter how old or how young they are, they all sit. Majority of them sit, my experience. And if you ask them why, they don't know why. Because their seniors are sitting, so they're also sitting. Right? So if it's necessary to sit, you must sit. But otherwise, it's better to stand. Did the Prophet ﷺ sit or stand? What do you think? Both. So he stood on the minbar, he stood amongst the Sahaba, and he sat as well. That is correct. There was a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Once a Sahabi came to him, Sayyidina Abu Rifa al-Adawi, he came and the Rasulullah ﷺ was delivering a sermon. And he came to him. I'm going to turn around because otherwise I'll be blocking. Normally, my laptop will be on the side, not in front of the screen. Right. While he was delivering the speech, he said, "O Messenger of Allah, I am a stranger who has come to find out about his religion. I do not know anything about my religion." Prophet ﷺ then turned towards me, stopped his speech, and came to me. A chair was brought to him, which I think had legs made of steel. Prophet ﷺ sat on that chair and began teaching me of that which Allah SWT had taught him. He then went back to his speech and completed it. Right, so this is a very good example where he was standing, he came down, sat amongst the Sahaba with that Sahabi in front of him, explained whatever had to be explained. The reason why I did it, I said that if this person might have been out of town, this might be the only opportunity he had for me to explain Islam to him. So therefore the Prophet ﷺ interrupted his speech, came down, answered his questions, and then returned. So this shows that you can both stand and sit. Okay, another thing that we have to be careful about is using non-words. What are some of the non-words? The crutch words. Yes, okay, is that so? Have you heard people using that in their speeches? Right. And how is it? Interesting or is it disturbing? Distracting. Very distracting. Very, very distracting. But you won't know whether you're using those words or not unless someone points it out to you. Right? So what do? If you're giving a speech, one of the things to do in order to establish whether you're using these non-words is to tape your speech. If you have to make a speech, you've got it ready, tape it. And then when you listen to it, then you realize whether you're using non-words or not. Or ask someone to inform you about it. There was once I had gone to a Jummah khutbah. There's one area that I used to go to. And I used to go to that particular mosque for a while. And there was a khatib there who was in the habit of using a particular non-word. And in the 20 or 25 minutes duration of his khutbah, I counted on one occasion, he used it about 38 times. 38 times using that one word. Now, what do you think? I was concentrating on his speech or was I concentrating on his non-words? Non-words. Absolutely. So that's what happens. If you're not aware of it, it could be very distracting to the audience. Then one day I decided, let me bring it to his attention. So I called him aside and said, "Sheikh, you don't mind if I tell you something?" He said, "No, not a problem. What is it, brother?" And I told him that this is what I observe. He said, "No, thank you very much." 2 or 3 weeks later, when I went to the same masjid, same imam was giving a talk, and he used that word no more than about 5 or 6 times. Right? So unless you know about it, you won't change, or it will be difficult to change. Right, let's move on. What to do before the day of the presentation, on the day before the presentation, and after the presentation. So the first thing, things to do before the day of the presentation. You have to practice, practice, practice all the time. And as the saying goes, fail to prepare, and you are preparing to fail. And that's a fact. And that's why lots of us are nervous because we're not prepared enough. So do whatever it takes to prepare. Even if there's a mirror, I told you and a full-length mirror is the best. Don't worry about other people. Go into a secluded room and practice your speech. The more you practice your speech, the more in front of a mirror, the more you'll see what you're doing right, or wrong. And Sheikh Ahmed Deedat used to do that. Because in his biography, his wife states that he used to practice his speeches in the house aloud, and I used to actually tell him, what is wrong with you? Why are you making such a din? Why are you making such a noise? See, so to reach that level of expertise in presentations, you have to do the hard work. Okay? So, and you need to role play the day step by step. So if you're going to go and give a speech, you're at home, role play what is to happen. So you know you're going to a particular venue, you're going to take your laptop or you're going to use their laptop. You must make sure you go there early. Have you got your extension cord or the power plug? If you're going to be using gadgets like this, pointers, etc., have you taken it with you? Have you got the batteries? Have you tested it? Is it working? Is it not working? So in your mind, you must play back exactly what you think will be happening at the venue. Plan and prepare what to say and how you say it. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also encouraged us once. He placed his hand on Sayyidina Abu Dhar's chest and said, "Oh Abu Dhar, there is no intelligence like astute planning, no piety like abstinence, and no family pride as excellent as good character." So he was telling him, planning, how important planning is. That you can find other hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on that as well. Next thing, things to do on the day of the speech. Set up the room in advance. Make sure you go to the venue early. You don't know what to expect. Right, make sure everything is as you want it. I have to come, make sure that the small table is here. Tell the organizers I won't be using the podium until they can use it afterwards. What about the mic? And a host of other things. Walk to the back of the venue. See whether there's any obstruction between the audience and you. It might happen that there might be pillars in the venue and the chairs are behind the pillars as well. Then you need to tell the organizers, move those chairs. But you won't know all these things until you get there. Once a person went to make a presentation to a very, very big venue, and because he went there late, he did not realize that the spot where he spoke from was in the center of the venue. So there were people sitting right around him, and this happens in big venues overseas. America, you get that. You got 5,000-10,000 people in a venue, and the stage might be in the center. So your presentation will be different than if you are standing in front. But you won't know these things until you go to the venue. If you can go to the venue before the day of the presentation, all the better. Right, what else can you do? Set up the room in advance. Know in advance what type of microphone you'll be using. That's very important. Now, just for your benefit, there's 4 types of microphones. One is the lapel one, the one that I use at IPCI. The other one is the head one, which I also use at IPCI. The third one is this one I'm holding now, without any cord. And the fourth one is the mic. It has a cord and it's normally on a stand. These are the 4 types of mics. Which is the best? Okay, the one around your head, around your ear, and which other one? The lapel one. Why are those the best? Your hands are free, right? You can use your hands for gestures. Between this mic, cordless mic and a corded mic, cordless mic is better because I can walk around. Corded, the one with the cord, especially if it is on a stand like this, you can't move around. And then again, if you have a podium or a lectern, again, you can't move around. Right? Now here, they have got this head mic, but because of the disturbance, see, these are mics as well. So if you go with that, near that, it then disturbs it. Okay, so you need to know before your presentation what type of mic you're going to be using. Right? And if it's uncomfortable for you, then you must tell them to change it. Next thing, if technology is to be used, make sure that you've got a backup plan. So if you're going to be using their laptop, what if their laptop doesn't function at the right time? And that's what happens to me once when I was a keynote speaker at a school. I went through halfway using their laptop. I tested it the day before, and then it stopped working. And I didn't have notes. I didn't have crypt cards. So I just had to now from memory carry on. But the effect was not as good as if I had a backup plan. So if you've got your laptop, rather take your own laptop. Even if they've got one. Now at IPCI, you'll notice they've got a laptop there. But I normally take my own. In fact, public speakers who are properly prepared, they will even take a projector. And if they're using their projector, not only that, they will even take a spare bulb for the projector. So if that bulb gives up during the presentation, they've got a spare bulb. That's the detailed preparation one has to make if you want to do a good job. Other things to remember, you have to read. Now this reading is reading generally, reading books to broaden your knowledge. And that's unfortunately something that our ummah has forgotten. The majority of it. I mean, the first verse of the Holy Quran was to read. We have forgotten to read, the majority of us, unfortunately. Commence the presentation by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Commence the lecture with Amma Ba'd. This is a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the course of your talk, always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Praise Him whenever you get the opportunity. Every time you mention Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's name, invoke salam on him. If you invoke salam, then the audience will also do likewise. It is sunnah to conclude the lecture with a dua. And as the MC, very important, quite often we are the MC. MC is the person who is the organizer or running the function. So quite often, at the end of the presentation, then he might tell the audience to give an applause to the speaker. That shouldn't be done as far as Sharia is concerned. What should be done is praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say Allahu Akbar, that sort of thing, or MashaAllah, or ask the audience to acknowledge by saying MashaAllah. Right? Do not insult your listeners, but use good words. Now, this is not from a Western perspective. This is from a Sharia perspective of good things to do. One is, Rasulullah said, Allah is kind and He likes kindness in all things. Kind speech and feeding the hungry guarantee you paradise. Do not criticize the doer, but criticize the behavior. Quite often, someone does something wrong, and instead of just criticizing the behavior, we start criticizing the person. Prophet ﷺ never criticized the person directly. If something was done against the Sharia, and even if those people were sitting in his audience, he would never embarrass them. He'd say that, why is it that so-and-so is now doing this, which is not permitted in terms of the Sharia? So the people who are there get the message. But otherwise, some people really embarrass the audience, which is not in terms of the Sharia. Keep it short and simple. Rasulullah said, talk to people with speech that they can understand. Do you wish that the people belie Allah and His Messenger? They won't even know what you're saying. Right? So just keep it simple. No matter how many degrees you have, no matter how well qualified you are, no matter how much experience you've got, just keep it simple. Jazakallah. Are there any questions? What if you're making a presentation before non-Muslims? Now, before non-Muslims, it might not be appropriate to talk about the Quran and Hadith. Because if they don't accept Islam, they're not really going to accept what you're saying, what's in the Quran and Hadith. You can mention the same words of the Quran, you can mention the same Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ without saying it's a Hadith. Because that's truths, what's there, and it's also in their scriptures. So, if I were making a presentation to parents about something, or even any audience, and I would tell them that the intention that we have is the most important. Whatever intention we have before we do something. Now, will that be something that's wrong to a non-Muslim, or a Christian, or a Jew? No, because that is a simple truth. If I were to say to parents, especially the parents who are looking after disabled children, for example, and if I have to say that paradise lies beneath the feet of the mother, is anything wrong with that, even if you're a non-Muslim? Never, because if there's non-Muslims in the audience and they are looking after disabled children, and you are saying that this is a fact, they will actually welcome it. It might even be in the scriptures. So the point I'm making is, you don't have to say, if there's non-Muslims in the audience, that the Quran says this, the Hadith says this. Mention it diplomatically, without mentioning that it's coming from the Quran or Hadith. And you'll get your message across.
The area for the speaker to talk. He shouldn't just come across and touch the audience. Some people say that's very dangerous because each person has just like boundaries or something.
Correct.
So they don't like you to touch them or to, especially if they are, I mean, in the high level. Like, for example, scholars or professors, something like that. They don't want you to just come across or to touch them as well.
That's correct. So
what do you think about
yes,
that?
the point I made was Rasulullah used to even touch Sahaba from time to time. So if a Sahabi came to him and asked him a question, and then the Prophet then touched Hazrat Abu Zar on his chest, and he said that, okay, now you, and then whatever he had to say, he said it. Or if he holds his hand like this, in a loving way, brotherly way. Now imagine the affection between the two. So it depends on the situation. So you won't do it always. See, in some instances, what they do is, especially if they call the audience onto the stage and say there's some activity that's taking place, they don't have to touch the audience member, but they will actually touch the audience member's hand, right? To show that there's an affinity between them, there's closeness between them. See, so it depends on the situation. You won't now go to someone that you really don't know and then touch them. It depends on the situation. Yes, brother? Speak loudly. What type of language?
So maybe you'll be able to.
What? Give an example. The word you use is except. Except. Okay. Okay, like slang. If you're using slang. Okay, the brother's question is, sometimes you're so used in your normal talk to use certain words, even slang words. Slang words, like how you talk with your brother when you're at home. Right, so, but you don't use that in public. So if you are so used to using those words, how do you overcome that problem? And the thing is, you must be aware of the words that you are using. And you must try and avoid using that in situations that are inappropriate. I'll give you an example. There is one Sheikh, when he gives his Jummah bayans, khutbahs, he is in the habit of using slang words, like the words that you might use when you are with your friends. So this young Imam, when he talks, he still uses the slang words when he's speaking to the audience, and we don't like it. As the audience members, we don't like it. Because you don't know who you're speaking to. You might be speaking to a professor there, you might be speaking to a mufti, you might be speaking to anyone. So you must be aware of the words that you are using which are inappropriate. And what you can do is ask your friends when you are speaking in public, is there any word or phrase that I'm using which is inappropriate? And then slowly you must try and wean yourself off that. Like the non-words. If you don't know you're using the non-words, then you won't stop using them. So this is an exercise, it's something that you'll have to practice. Brother, you had your hand up? Mohammed?
I think that sometimes using the slang words may break the barriers between you and the audience.
There is a place for slang words, depending on the audience. So if you've got youngsters, or if you, Muhammad, you are giving a talk to your friends, whatever about, so to them, you might use the slang words. Or if I am a teacher and I've got my classmates or my students, and they know that I'm quite a jovial person, and I might use it to them, depending on the situation. So sometimes it's useful, but not always. You just have to be careful. Someone had their hand up in the back.
Question the same thing, that sometimes what happens if you are addressing youngsters?
Yes.
And youngsters, most of the time, once you don't use their language,
correct,
they tend to sleep, they tend to not even want to concentrate to you. So sometimes in order to break the ice or everyone talk to them,
there is a place for it. I agree. There is a place and time for it. How do you make sure you're keeping it simple? How do you make sure you're not discussing unnecessary things? That takes practice. How do you know that you are not discussing unnecessary things? That's the advantage of having your speech written down. Especially for the people who are starting off, and even for experienced speakers, they always have their speech written down. And then what you have to do, you have to go through the speech and see, for example, are there any slang words there? Are there words that you